Thank you for joining me on another episode of She Leads Now, a podcast for women entrepreneurs and professionals who want to expand your innate leadership ability and influence, cultivate a culture of belonging and collaboration, develop others to perform at their greatest potential, and of course, live a life that is fulfilling, abundant, and impactful. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon. After nearly 14 years of climbing the corporate ladder as an HR professional and a leader, I became a corporate dropout and have spent the past several years helping organizations and leaders align their business goals with their talent strategies, strengthen their leadership bench, and create environments that employees actually want to be a part of. Tune in every Wednesday for insight, practical tools and strategies, as well as inspiring stories from other women leaders who have climbed the ropes and are now making a huge impact within their spheres of influence. Looking forward to chatting with you soon. Welcome to another episode of the She Leads Now podcast. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and I am thrilled to be here with you this week. This week, we have another amazing woman joining us, Kariz Matic. Kariz has spent 20 plus years bringing a systems discipline to leaders, teams, and their digital products with outcomes of seven-figure cost reductions and revenue growth. She's the CEO of The Matic, a product consultancy with a special focus on analytics, workflow design, as well as program, project, and product management. Welcome to the show, Kariz. So excited to have you here.
Thank you. I am very excited to be here.
Awesome. So I gave the high level overview, right, of your 20 years of experience and the work that you're doing now. Talk to us a little bit more about your journey into coming into this space, from working in traditional environments to starting the business and supporting other organizations.
Sure. Actually, to tell you my background, I should tell you even before I started working. I didn't know it then when I was younger, but I apparently have a very fine-tuned gift for organization. I'm passionate about it. I really love things like naming things, categorizing things, putting things in buckets. And it shows up in my entire life, right? Like not just at work, but I have a system for organizing my laundry so that it's faster to do. I have a system for how I grocery shop so that I have ingredients for multiple meals in the same week, but not wasting any. I keep checklists for everything, including when I start a bike ride, what are the items that I need to have in my back pockets before I leave the house? Kind of an obsessive organizer, a checklist keeper, and taxonomist. And that is what has guided my entire career path. When I got my first job in tech, I started out as an analyst, right? And my job was to support other folks and understand the problems and help them find solutions for it. Eventually, I learned a little bit of coding, and I learned how to become an engineer. And so I started building some products myself. And what I found that I really loved about the technical side of things was how information can be organized to turn it into data. Basically, how you organize information to give you more insights on how to make decisions, how to prioritize things. So that became a little bit of my specialty. And eventually I started managing teams of engineers, of analysts, basically organizing the people that were going to do the work and helping them solve those problems from a high-level logical perspective, and helping to understand how to make up a team that gets the problem solved that you're trying to solve. So my first 10 years I spent working in corporate America. And after about 10 years, I felt like something else was missing. I wasn't quite sure what that was. And so I started this path into consulting. And I started working with multiple companies and trying to find my own clients. And in the process of doing that, I actually realized that my skills in analytics or in data was applicable to other aspects of business. So then I also started helping marketing teams, and I built a little bit of an expertise around marketing data as well. In the beginning of that, I ended up also moving to the Bay Area So my client mix also became a little bit more diverse and started working with startups, with medium-sized businesses. And after a while, my projects got a little bit bigger, and I needed to bring other folks to the projects that I was working. So I actually started my company as a way to hire other folks to bring them on my team to work some of the projects that I was working. So it doesn't happen all the time, but when I do need to bring other folks to my projects, The Matic kind of serves as the umbrella business for that.
That's quite a journey. And I love the common theme and the flow, right? Like you've taken something that you have just always naturally been good at and have been able to leverage it in the different departments and the different functions and certainly the different businesses that you've supported. So that is awesome. We were talking about this earlier. When it comes to operations, when it comes to systems, when it comes to standard operating procedures, when it comes to all of that, especially when you're in the beginning phases of a business and maybe you have a small team and it's all hands on deck, the last thing you want to think about is like, how do we map out what it is that we do, or how do we create SOPs that list every piece of it? So with your experience, how have you been able to maybe not convince, but bring your earlier stage entrepreneurs along to see the benefit and to see the value in creating those systems early on in their business so that it could lead to the 7-figure growth that you've supported other companies in doing?
So the way I look at it, I think the challenge for early entrepreneurs, and even myself, is that as an entrepreneur, you have so much creative energy. You want to do a bunch of new things. You want to be in creation mode. But running a business also requires a lot of routine and a lot of things that happen on a regular basis. You got to pay your bills every month. You got to pay taxes every year. You have to pay your employees every month or every 2 weeks even. There's a lot of routine that happens. Even with marketing, it's not a one and done. You don't just tell everybody you started a business and expect them to all show up 5 years later. You have to be continuously demonstrating what the work is that you're offering. So marketing, even marketing, has an operational routines. And I think the challenge is trying to balance your need as an entrepreneur to be in this creative mode when there are all these other things that kind of need to happen as a matter of routine. And what I want to say to that is, if you do not have those systems in place, every time that you have to do one of those tasks, it actually eats up more brain power, it eats up more energy from you, and it takes more time because you're constantly having to think not just what needs to be done, but what are the steps that they need to happen in, what are the assets or the resources that you need to gather in order to make that thing happen. And so if you understood what that flow looks like in advance, then you can just go through the motions of doing it rather than also always thinking about what is the process, what are the steps, what do I need? Because that takes a little bit of extra mental load that you could be using for your creative pursuits. What I want to say to earlier entrepreneurs is setting up your systems actually helps you create more mental space and more time for yourself to do the thing that we all do best, which is creating the new things. The way to get that started is think about all the things that are already happening by routine, all the things that I just mentioned: paying your bills, paying your taxes, doing filing, whatever it is, shredding paper. I mean, there are a lot of things, even in the business that you do. If you're an artist, you have to clean your materials and put them away and then put them back. If you are a consultant, there's files that you have to create and files that you have to organize. All of that administrative work is happening by routine as a part of your work. So just understanding for each thing, for each task that needs to be done, there's probably some kind of flow that needs to happen. And taking the time to step back at some point and just documenting what that looks like, what you think it looks like. And it is an evolutionary process. So whatever you document today, it's going to be different 3 months from now, or it might be different from client to client, or it might be different from deliverable to deliverable. And depending on what those variations are, as you're going through those motions and as those variations show up, you continue to evolve the documents that you're creating. But the whole idea there is you're essentially project managing yourself as you document those, because next time you need to do it, you're looking at that list instead of trying to remember what is the next step again and what do I have to do.
Okay, so you've given us a lot of really great nuggets there. And one of the key pieces that I took out of this is that in really taking that step back and creating these processes and documenting them, that when you bring on a team, it's going to make it easier and it's going to save more time for you versus having to like handhold someone through the process. So you create these operating procedures, you document these things. But I think the incentive of you, the entrepreneur, get to operate in your zone of genius by doing that. I think that's a great shift in perspective for sure. Yeah. That might entice and excite people in getting those together. So as you've brought on individuals to the organization, both on a consultancy capacity and employee capacity, how does that now translate? So we've gone from you're the solopreneur, you're doing all of the things, you've taken a step back, you found some systems. I use Trello, and I know that there are a whole bunch of other project management systems out there. And now you're bringing on team members. So how do you continue the flow? And as the leader who is operating in their zone of genius, they're doing business development, they're doing all these things. How do you continue to monitor or have a handle on the fact that things are being documented and processes are being consistently repeated?
So this is actually my favorite part about building your systems in advance is when somebody shows up, you already have something for them to do right away. But once you start to scale, your job then becomes to monitor and manage, right? Not to execute, but to monitor and manage. And to be able to do that, you'll need to add a couple of steps into your process. Those steps might include some kind of regular reporting, like a weekly report of what happened or what didn't happen and what needs to happen next, so that you can monitor the performance of the people that are working on your behalf on those particular systems or those particular processes. And for our team, we have a process review. So once a month, once we've done our monthly cycle of activities, say for the marketing team, we will actually do like a 10-minute process review. Were there steps in this process that were missing? Were there things that were confusing? Were there bottlenecks where we could optimize or make it better? As I mentioned earlier, it's a continuous evolution, right? And when you're by yourself, you're constantly evolving that process. But once you start to bring other people in, you also need to create space for you as a group to collaborate, because the process that might work best for you may not work for how that person thinks who's actually doing it. So the only way I can see it actually being specific to the team that's working on your behalf is to have that conversation. And if it needs to happen monthly or quarterly, to be honest, when we first started implementing the process review, we were doing it monthly, but eventually we got things into a routine enough that we only needed to do it quarterly. But it is important to review those processes, because not only do your deliverables change, but the environment changes, or the work changes, or the people change. And whenever you change any of those variables, there's almost always going to be impact to one or more of your processes. And not giving yourself space to allow that to evolve will create a lot of those inefficiencies down the line. I mean, I've discovered processes that people were still doing that nobody was using the outcomes for anymore. Maybe it was important to do 5 years ago, but if no one's using that piece of information, then you're spending 30 minutes of your time every week to do something nobody's using. So a process review is really important for understanding how you need to evolve that to support the business that you're trying to run in that moment.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And so as you were talking, I started to think about some of the startups that I've supported in a client capacity. That whole thought around, we've been doing the same things for the last 5 years, right? Like that mindset, what got us here is going to get us there. And we know no, that's not true. So in a scenario where maybe an organization is already established, right, 3-5 years in, but they didn't do the initial work of setting processes, and now they're in this growth trajectory, what would be the best advice to help them not only do the work of going back and putting those things in place, but also leveraging that data to support in whatever growth plans that they have?
Sure. So this is really common. I don't want any business to feel bad about having this debt incurred. We call when we're building product, we call this technical debt. It's, oh yeah, we need to do that, but it's not high importance. So we're just going to keep putting it in the back burner until it starts to bite us in the butt. And most of the time it won't, right? It won't until it's impacting the bottom line in some way that's really visible. So I'll give you an example. We had a client who had built a really great product, and they were ramping up clients so quickly that they didn't have their support routines in place. They didn't have onboarding processes. All their code was like a mishmash. Their code was in like 250 repositories. So every time they needed to edit code, nothing was documented and they didn't know how to find it. It would take them like 5 days to find 2 lines of code that they would need to edit. Yeah. So your options are, you can tackle the project of going back and deciding on how you're going to organize that, and then taking that backlog of what's already there and reorganizing it according to that new system of organization. Or you can bring on somebody like me who brings their crew so that you as a group, your company can continue to do what you do best. And we're just going to help you catch all of that stuff up to the current state so that your operating state matches to where you currently are, and then give you a roadmap for how you're going to maintain it in the future.
That's awesome. And just so I understand, in terms of the services that you offer, you do that for every function within the organization, right? It's not limited to just marketing or product or anything like that. You and your team support organizations in every function.
We do. We definitely specialize in companies that build software, either for themselves or for external people.
Okay, so shifting gears here a little. So there are situations where, as the consultant, you're leading by influence versus like authority. And it may have come natural to you because you probably just use the data to tell the point. But how did you learn that skill? If you really think back of like how you really learned to identify, okay, this is a situation where I don't necessarily have hard authority, but I can influence decisions. What's some of the tools or tips that you can provide on how to be effective in that space as a leader?
My techniques definitely lean heavily on my skill set because I am very data driven, because I am very process oriented. When I'm having those conversations, it's usually with a CEO or a C-level or VP or something. I really try to understand what their objectives are. And those objectives will tell me what the priorities are for what work needs to happen. And ultimately, the decision is theirs. My job, I see my job as the consultative person that helps them organize the information to help them figure out, are these the priorities we need to take? And then if these are the priorities, what is the order of work that needs to happen according to that priority? And is that something we want to tackle right now? I don't feel like I have to convince them. I think that the data speaks for itself. In many cases, you can anticipate the impact of doing something or not doing it. If you don't upgrade these servers now, in 6 months, it'll end of life and your application might go down. And it's going to take 3 months to upgrade those servers. You basically have 3 months to make this decision. Or if you don't start marketing this event that you're holding 6 weeks out, you may not have as much conversion and you won't have as many participants in your workshop or your conference as you would expect, because the data says for every marketing push that you do, you get 100 subscribers. And if you don't start doing that now, you might get 200 subscribers over 2 weeks instead of 800 over 8 weeks. So I think there's a lot of information that's available that you can monitor as part of your business that'll tell you what the behaviors of the market are, that will then also help you decide how far out can I hold off on this decision and how urgent is it for me. Of course, the closer you get to that deadline, the higher your risk is, because there's still a lot of unknowns of what's going to happen between the time that you start that work and the time that it finishes, especially for bigger pieces of work. And so I think it's just a matter of providing as much context as possible, because that is my skill set. I can see what the data tells us, and I can see what the process looks like. And based on that information, I can tell you what potential impacts there could be. I'm not psychic, so I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you what the information tells us right now. And as new information comes in, obviously that will change the parameters of what we're looking at. Mm-hmm. And so that is part of managing the work, is being able to understand how each variable that shows up is impacting your overall plan. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes total sense. And as you were talking, I was thinking through, for the audience who are various stages in their business, for that earlier stage, if you need to just get basic information out or basic information documented, what are some tools that you typically recommend to clients?
Honestly, I feel like it needs to be what works for you. So if you've been writing in a notebook and suddenly I say you should use Asana or Trello, then I'm actually taxing you with the work of having to learn a new system before you even learn how to use it for yourself. So that should happen in the time that works for you, because it's not just about putting your information in that tool, but it's also about understanding how that tool works and then understanding how that tool will support what you do. So as much as I build lots of software products, I really believe that there are infinite tools out there that can support you. But if you don't understand how you need to work or what your process is, then you won't know how to leverage that tool to work for you. If you just need something to write things down, there's a really cool product called Google Keep. You can put checklists, you can put written notes, or even just Google Docs. But the key really is understanding what your process is, and then figuring out what tools need to be in place in order to help support that process. Because the tools really are there to help you speed things up, help you keep large things organized. It's there to help collect things for you, but it's not going to be doing the thinking for you. That's the part that is still our superpower as human beings.
I'm so glad you mentioned that and you went into that direction, because I do think that, especially when you're just starting out, like everyone has a system and there are a slew of tools out there. Oh, you need a CRM and you need this and you need that. And you're right. The time that it takes you to learn the thing, to figure it out, and then only to realize, but wait, I don't need this information, or this is not what's relevant to me. That is definitely something that I experienced through my learning. I mean, I'm glad, because I have a little bit of knowledge in just about a lot of things. But at the end of the day, you're right. It starts with what's a process that works for you. And if it's Excel, if it's a Google Doc, or whatever the case may be, start there and then determine, okay, what product can make this easier? What product can speed it up? Because the truth is, some of these products, they're complicated. So I love the fact that you focus on do what works for you, and then identify a tool that can complement that, or at least expand your capacity.
And if I can add to that, I also want to say, if you are stuck, you feel like Excel isn't working for you enough, ask yourself not just what else can you do, but what is it that's not working for you? I don't like Excel because I can't add images to it. Great. Now you need to find a tool that looks like Excel, but you can add images to. But if you didn't know that specific thing, like, I just hate it, I just don't know, it doesn't work for me, that could be 100 more tools that could look like Excel, but does 100 other things you don't need. So asking yourself, what is the specific criteria that I am not able to meet with the tools that I have, will allow you to then find the tools that serve that specific need for you.
Yeah, I love that question. It just simply what's missing, identifying what's missing. And that goes back to you got to pull your head up out of the sand as the leader, as the business owner, to really look at your business holistically to identify opportunities. So thank you for that. I will be leveraging that over the next several weeks, actually. As we shift gears and wrap up here, I'm curious in terms of books that you are reading or that you have read that you felt have been really pivotal in helping you as a business owner, helping you as a leader, or just helping you as a human being in general.
Okay, so what I was also going to add to that last bit, which is this is a good segue into this question, is sometimes you don't know what the process should be. So when I first started helping marketing teams with their data, I didn't know how to present data because I didn't know what their objectives were and I didn't understand the process. And I had to understand the marketing process before I could showcase information about it. And sometimes it really does help to buy into someone's system, to use a product like Trello, to use a CRM, because sometimes those systems will help inform you of what your process should be or where your gaps are. One of my favorite books that kind of helped that click for me was this book written by my coach. It's called Get Clients Now. I think there are multiple editions of that book, but it's a really great marketing system for solopreneurs, small business owners. It's a very simple step-by-step talk through what you need to do to set up your marketing system. My strong belief in when you are using someone else's system is that almost always you will find gaps in that system because of the way that you need to work or because of your business. And those systems are designed to be broad and overarching lots of different styles of businesses. So you, as the person who's using that product, what you really need to do to make that system work for you is consume what they're offering, figure out which of those parts work for you, and then augment it with the components that you feel like are missing for your specific business.
Absolutely. And who's the author of Get Clients Now?
CJ Hayden.
CJ Hayden. Okay. We will be sure to include that book, the link in the show notes. So thank you for that. I have not heard of that book, but again, adding it to the wish list there on Amazon. I swear by the end of this year, I'm going to be a very well-read leader and entrepreneur, which is a gift, right? I do believe that leaders are readers, and to the extent that we can leverage knowledge and wisdom from other people, I am down for that. So Kariz, as we wrap up here, as the listeners are thinking to themselves like, wow, I really need to get my act together, my back end a little bit more structured and organized, how can they get in contact with you?
I would say the best way to do it, we're actually putting together some online workshops to figure out how you can be a better systems thinker. I really think there are some fundamental thinking methods that you can employ to think about all your entire business from a systems perspective, whether that's operations, marketing, product, services. Everything requires a system. And if you can be in a systems mindset, then you can figure out how to ramp up all of those components of your business. So we are setting up some online courses. I really encourage everybody to sign up for our mailing list. So you can go to our website, and at the very bottom of that first page, there's a link to sign up for our mailing list, and we'll be announcing those courses as they come out.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. And we will have a link to the website on there as well. And as far as social media, is there anywhere that you hang out on social media?
Mostly on LinkedIn for the professional stuff. I'm also really active on a bunch of other ones, but I'm an avid crafter because it helps my brain think about different things differently. So if you want to see some of the personal stuff and how I use systems in my personal life, you can also follow me on Instagram.
I imagine everything has a label in your house. Like I just imagine opening the cabinets and everything is labeled, like they're stocked just like they are at the stores in a straight line. And I love it. I'm not that organized, but I am very structured in how I like things to be in my space, but that's just what I envision, the white labels on everything.
Yeah. So I think the funniest one for me is my laundry system. So I'm a sports enthusiast. I cycle and I run, and I have a bunch of different things that need to be hand washed or hand dried because it'll ruin the fabrics if I put it through the dryer. So all of my socks, all of my underwear, all my bras, all of my arm warmers, all my gloves, they each have their own bag that's labeled so that I can wash them in the machine, but then I can pull them out and they're all hung dried together so that's easier to put away. I got to tell you, I have not lost a pair of socks in about 15 years because they're always in the bag and they're always matched. It's a blessing and a curse because sometimes you want a new pair of socks, but there's no room in the drawer because they just don't wear out.
Oh my gosh, that would save so many pairs of socks.
I have an Instagram post where I shared how I organize my clothes. Like all of my clothes are also organized by sport and by season. And like my tops and bottoms are already paired. So if I have to get up at 4 a.m. for a bike ride, I'll just grab a bundle and I know that it already has everything I need in it.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. Okay. So before I let you go, one question, because there's two school of thoughts here. So for the readers, right, the people who have hundreds of books on their bookshelves, there's the group that likes to color coordinate the books, where it's a tall book, then short book, and fat book, and skinny book. And then there are those who are like me that like them to be organized by topic. And it's like tall all the way down to skinny. I don't care what color they are. I know my business books are in one space. My marketing books are in one space. So what is your system? I'm curious.
My personal organization system is by topic. But as you already have heard me say, you got to do what works best for you. I 100% love seeing the bookshelves that are organized by color. But for me personally, it's not enough because I think I'm more of the data side rather than the visual side.
Yeah.
If I were more of a visual thinker, I think I would definitely prefer the color coding.
Yeah. I mean, I love to see it. I absolutely love to see it. And then I start to cringe when I'm like, oh, if you would have just moved that one over there, then they would have been even. And like, that's where my mind goes.
I understand. Same.
Thank you for entertaining me with that question. Kariz, it has certainly been a pleasure having you on the show. I've certainly learned a lot. I'm sure my listeners have learned a lot, and they've taken just a few key pieces, regardless of where they are in the maturity of their business or the size of their business, that they can begin to implement and leverage to make things easier on them, and then certainly make things easier on the team. So definitely appreciate that. Again, all of Kariz's contact information, as well as her website and her social handles, will be included in the show notes. With that, thank you so much, Kariz. And for the listeners, thank you for tuning in this week. I will be back to chat with you next week. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Leads Now. If you found today's episode helpful or got a piece of insight that you plan to implement in your business or organization, I would love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Sabine Gideon, that's my handle, and send me a private message. Or feel free to go ahead and leave a review on either Apple or Spotify. I also invite you to share this episode with anyone in your network who you think might benefit from this content. Lastly, be sure to check the show notes and the description below for links to resources, including relevant downloads, articles, and any upcoming training. Until we chat again, have a blessed and powerful week.